Some places don't need darkness to be terrifying. This story happened on a bright, sunny afternoon. No storm clouds, no eerie music, just the sea, the sand, and something no one could explain. In July 2011, a woman named Jessica took a solo trip to a small, lesser-known beach along the Oregon coast. She had just gotten out of a stressful job and wanted nothing more than to unwind, disconnect, and walk barefoot along the shoreline without thinking of deadlines or phone calls. The beach wasn't completely isolated. There were usually a few campers parked along the cliffs, but it was quiet enough that you could go hours without seeing another person. Jessica arrived around noon and set up a small spot with a blanket, a cooler, and her journal. She dipped into the water briefly, collected a few shells, and then settled into her writing. Everything was normal, peaceful, until she felt the sand shift. Not a wave, not erosion, but a deep, slow movement directly beneath her feet, like something massive had turned over in the earth. She looked around. No one else seemed to notice. The water remained calm, but she felt it again, closer now, as if something were tunneling through the sand beneath the beach, silently, rhythmically. She got up and moved closer to the rocks lining the base of the cliff. It was cooler there, and the sand felt firmer. She convinced herself it was her imagination, maybe distant construction, or her body reacting to hours in the sun. But around 4 p.m., she noticed something strange. The beach had changed. Not drastically, but subtly. Shells that had been near her blanket were gone. Patterns in the sand had shifted. Small details, her footprints, the drag marks from her cooler, had vanished. Then came the sound. A slow, wet dragging noise, like something heavy and alive moving just beneath the surface. It circled the area where she had been sitting, creating a faint ripple in the sand, almost like something massive was pacing just beneath the grains. She stood completely still, staring at the shifting ground. It stopped abruptly, directly in front of her, and then a shape began to rise. The sand bubbled upward. A round, smooth mound pushed out, maybe the size of a basketball. Then another, all in a perfect circle. Jessica backed up, heart racing. Suddenly, the center of the circle collapsed inward with a soft thud, and an awful stench hit the air. Salt, rot, and something like sulfur. The sand began to darken, almost like it was soaking in moisture from beneath. She ran. She sprinted toward her car, not daring to look back. She made it to the gravel pullout and slammed the door shut. When she finally turned back toward the beach, there was nothing there. No shapes, no pits, not even footprints. She left immediately. Later that night, she found a small patch of sand inside the car. That was impossible. She hadn't sat down, hadn't touched the sand again. She vacuumed it out and tried to forget. But the next day, she received a message. It came as a voicemail, no number listed. Just static, followed by what sounded like slow, wet breathing. Then, a whisper. "You left too soon." Jessica changed her number the next day. Years later, while camping along a different stretch of coast, she met a retired geologist who used to study that exact area. When she casually mentioned the shifting sands, his face went pale. He said the cliff base near that beach had ancient fault lines, some of which hadn't moved in centuries. But there were old tribal legends about sand devils, creatures that moved just beneath the earth, hunting by sound and vibration. The locals never stayed on the beach past midday. Jessica never returned to that beach. But sometimes, when she walks on sand, any sand, she swears she can feel it shift under her again. Not all the time, just when she's alone. In August 2018, the Harris family, Mark, Lydia, and their 10-year-old daughter Kaylee, booked a last-minute beach rental on the North Carolina coast. The listing was picturesque. A whitewashed house just beyond the dunes, wide windows overlooking the ocean, and private beach access. They were told the rental was under new ownership and undergoing minor renovations, which explained the slightly cheaper rate. They didn't mind. They just wanted quiet, a week away from phones, meetings, and city noise. But by the second day, they all agreed. Something felt off. Not in the house itself. That was clean, tidy, modern. It was the beach. There were no birds, no gulls, no pelicans, not even crabs scuttling across the sand. The air felt flat, as if sound itself had been muted. And despite the blazing sun, there was always a chill when standing near the tall dune behind the house. It cast a shadow even in late afternoon. On the third evening, Mark walked outside after dinner. Kaylee had gone upstairs to draw, and Lydia was doing dishes. He stopped at the edge of the boardwalk and looked out across the dunes. That's when he saw someone watching him. About 20 feet up, partially hidden in the tall grass, was the figure of a person, still as stone. No movement. No face he could make out. Just a head barely rising above the ridge, staring down toward the rental. He blinked, startled. But when he looked again, there was nothing there. He convinced himself it was the play of light and shadows. That night, Kaylee came into their room crying. She said someone had knocked on her window, her second-story window. Lydia checked. Nothing outside, no footprints. But Kaylee wouldn't sleep alone again. Mark started waking up at 3:17 a.m. every morning. Always 3:17. The house would be dead silent. Then, faint knocking. 3 slow knocks. First on the back door, then the front, then on the living room window. Each night, same sequence. By the time he gathered the nerve to check, no one was there. On the 5th day, they considered leaving early. But Lydia, ever practical, didn't want to waste the money. That afternoon, Kaylee drew something. She showed it to Mark quietly, without words. A charcoal sketch of the house. In the top corner, behind the dune, a tall, dark figure stood, faceless, arms too long, fingers dragging into the sand. Around it, smaller shapes curled into the grass, almost like it was surrounded by crouching animals or children. Kaylee said it came in her dream, but she saw it from her window too. That night, Mark set up a baby monitor from the living room, pointing at the back patio. The motion detection feature was on. If anything moved, it would record. At 3:17 a.m., he woke again. No knocking this time. Just a faint, guttural hum from the monitor speaker. When he looked at the screen, the motion icon blinked. He replayed the clip. The patio door creaked open on its own. A tall figure entered slowly, so thin it almost seemed bent in half. It passed in front of the camera and paused. Its head jerked toward the lens. It had no eyes, no nose, just a smooth surface and a mouth. A wide, black slit of a grin. And then it disappeared from the frame. Mark woke Lydia and Kaylee, and they left immediately. drove 5 hours without stopping. Back home, Mark contacted the rental owner to report the footage. The reply came short. "Sorry you had a strange time. That house has a history of sightings. We're working with local authorities to figure it out." He checked the listing again the next day. It was gone. To this day, Mark won't stay anywhere near coastal dunes. And Kaylee? She stopped drawing completely. She told a school counselor a few months later that every time she picks up a pencil, she sees the mouth. And sometimes, in her dreams, the dune grows taller, and the figure calls her name. Some things are buried for a reason. Some beaches are left untouched not because they're hard to reach, but because locals know better. In June 2015, 4 friends, Ethan, Priya, Devin, and Chris, took a weekend camping trip to a lesser-known beach in Northern California called Driftwood Cove. It wasn't on any major tourist map, and it required a steep hike through a ravine to reach. But Chris had been there once as a teen and swore it was worth it. "Totally empty," he said. "Feels like the edge of the world." It did. No cell service. No buildings. Just cold waves, blackened driftwood, and sky. They set up camp inland, just beyond the dunes. A small fire pit, 2 tents, beer in a cooler, and sleeping bags. By sunset, they were laughing, swapping stories, and enjoying the isolation. That's when Priya noticed something strange at the tide line. A patch of sand, maybe 5 feet wide, that was dry, even though the tide had just passed over it. The rest of the beach was darkened with seawater, but this one area remained pale, almost powdery. She called the others over. Devin, curious, stuck a stick into the middle. It went down almost a foot, then hit something hard. Not rock, not wood. Something smooth, rounded, like a helmet or shell. They spent the next hour digging with driftwood and bare hands. As the sand gave way, more of the surface appeared. It was a dull, gray dome. Seamless, about 4 feet wide. Metal or stone, they weren't sure. No markings, no rust. Just there. Ethan joked it looked like a buried alien pod. Chris didn't laugh. He pulled out a flashlight and stared at it. "That wasn't here when I came in high school," he said quietly. "We camped right around here. I'd remember something this big." As night fell, the unease grew. The object didn't reflect light like it should have. It stayed flat, wrong. They returned to camp, a little shaken. But as the fire burned low, Chris went quiet. "I don't remember hiking out last time," he finally said. "I remember getting here. I remember the beach, but not the walk back. I just remember standing near that dune, and then I was home." Around midnight, the wind picked up. The waves sounded farther away, like the tide had receded unnaturally far. Then, the humming started. A low, deep vibration, almost imperceptible. You didn't hear it. You felt it in your ribs, your teeth, your skull. The friends stepped out of their tents. The buried dome glowed faintly. Soft pulses, like something alive. Then they noticed the driftwood. Every piece of old wood along the shore was pointing toward it, as if drawn magnetically. Even twigs near their campfire had shifted. Priya screamed. Behind them, in the dune shadows, stood a figure. Tall, thin, wrapped in something like wet seaweed. Its face was bone pale, mouth wide open, eyes absent. Ethan lunged for the flashlight. When the beam hit the figure, it vanished. No footsteps, no trace. They ran. No gear, no food, just whatever they could grab. But the trail back out had changed. Where there was once a narrow ravine path, now there was only sand, smooth, unbroken, like no one had walked there in decades. Chris began repeating the same words under his breath. It buried itself. It buries everything. It buries everything. Devon shoved him to break the trance. They picked a direction and ran. By dawn, they found a road. Not the one they came in on. A ranger spotted them and drove them to town. When they told their story, he just shook his head. "You were near Driftwood?" he asked. "That place eats hikers." They later looked it up. Multiple missing persons reports in that area over decades. Most dismissed as coastal accidents. None with solid evidence. They returned weeks later, in daylight, with more people. But Driftwood Cove looked different. No strange sand patch. No buried dome. No trace of anything they saw. But when Devon checked his phone's photo gallery, one image had saved before they lost signal. A blurry nighttime shot of the beach, the dome faintly visible. And in the corner, a figure crouched, inches from the camera, mouth wide, watching.